So today we're going to talk about ways to make a man chase you without playing games. And I'm really excited to invite a dear friend of mine, Thomas Edwards, who's a professional dating and relationship coach. And what spurred this conversation actually relates to dating apps. He did a post on Facebook suggesting that dating apps are on the decline. So Thomas, before we get into the particulars, looks like, is your mic, is your phone, is your, oh, there we go. Before we get into the particulars, I want to talk about dating apps for a second and whether or not, so why don't you share with everybody who's watching, what was the post and the impetus for it and everything else?
Yeah. So, first of all, thanks for having me on here, man. It's first of all, great to see you and to connect.
Likewise.
And I was reading a lot of information just around like what's going on with online dating post COVID. I think COVID was essentially the gasoline that just made online dating go to a whole nother level. And is there exhaustion there? I was just curious. And so I started reading some articles and I just noticed that, the way to really see how businesses are doing is when you listen to their like end of year reports and their quarterly reports that they have to report publicly. Okay. And you start to see some of the stats that's going on. And I started to notice that online dating year over year has actually declined a minimum of 4 to 5% across the board. Match in particular, across their apps has seen a greater decline, around 15 to 16%. And even Tinder has seen a much bigger decline. And so if this is happening across the board, what is that telling me? Well, I posted that online dating will definitely be on the decline and expect layoffs over the next 12 to 24 months, just because from a business perspective, that's just what happens when you start to see that kind of decline happen. So that's what spurred that conversation.
It's interesting. So I'm going to share with you something kind of funny because I'm on Bumble, I'm on Hinge, I'm on Match, but I always think of Match as a site, not an app, because it's more robust. And I'm on Millionaire Match, which I just think people pay more to be on there. So there's a little bit, if you're willing to invest more, maybe that suggests there's a more higher quality, whatever.
Yeah.
So, but what's fascinating to me that happened today, all of a sudden, I paid extra for the see who swiped you category feature.
Yeah.
All of a sudden, I had 50 women in there. And I was like, holy shit, what happened? And by the way, it's been crickets for like 2 months. And I'm like, okay, have they been hiding my profile and all of a sudden it's popped up again? And then I'm wondering how long that's going to last. Do you know anything about what I just shared?
Yeah. So when I started noticing that there's a decline in online dating, I was like, all right, well, these companies have to do something, right? So what are they going to do? Well, here comes higher tiers. They basically will create ways where you, the user, need to spend more money for for features that you should already inherently have. So whether it's being able to see who's matched, who swiped on you, or being more available and accessible on certain apps, or getting higher for example, the League charges $30,000. I think it's $30,000 a year for their highest tier. I think Tinder is right now. I think they launched a $500 a month program where you can have more swipes available and also be able to see when someone swipes you. But the thing is, we should have access to this information already, right? And what it basically has become is businesses have taken the same business model that Google Ads has been able to make tons of money on, and they basically are now incorporating that into the dating apps. So if you want to be more seen and you want to see who's seen you, well, you're going to have to pay for your placement, and it made me realize that, these days the business of online dating is to actually keep you on the site for as long as possible. That's just really what it is.
It's interesting because I had this thought the other day. I live in Redondo Beach. You used to live here in Southern California. And I would say if you drew a circle of, say, 10-mile circle, there's probably, let's just say there's 1 million people that live here, and cut that in half of them men, half of them women, 500,000. Well, let's cut that in half of single versus, youngsters or whatnot. So that puts us at 250,000. And let's cut that half that they're possibly age appropriate. So let's bring that down. Let's even cut that in half again and again. And we come up with, let's just say there's 30,000 people that are in my age demographic, okay, that could be single.
Mm-hmm.
I go on Match.com and I do a search within that same parameters, and only 500 people show up. My point to bringing this up is, I think there should be a national singles registry that like a driver's license, because it occurs to me that there's probably 20,000 people literally live within 5 miles of me that I just don't know that exist.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so this comes back to the question about dating apps. Are they obsolete? But I guess really the question is, should we ditch our dating apps and go to a more organic way of meeting people again?
Yeah. I mean, I remember back in 2000, I want to say 2012, 2013. And so if you can kind of remember what this time looks like, Twitter, I think Twitter had eclipsed 1 million users at that time. And Tinder did not exist. I mean, in fact, location-based dating, right? Like when you have dating apps that actually will pin your location, that was pretty controversial back then. People didn't want to be found. They didn't like the idea of their location services being available and on all the time, right? So I noticed that there was an acceleration of like this availability that we were going to live in. And I knew that at some point we were going to face what I originally called at the time an analog phase. And it didn't mean that like all of a sudden technology was going to be obsolete, but we were going to at some point prioritize finding ways to accelerate meeting people in person, face to face, IRL, in other words, right? So I think COVID came in and they accelerated that. And I think what we're seeing now is people aren't necessarily ditching there are some people who are ditching the apps. Don't get me wrong. They are over it. They're exhausted and they're fatigued. However, there are some people who are realizing, well, you know what? I'm better off trying my luck meeting people in real life. And speed dating events are now becoming more popular again, and being able to go out in social environments, not necessarily bars, but themed venues, whether it's sober curious bars or dessert bars, or people who are now looking to find people through activities that they enjoy. So meetup groups and event groups, these are now building up.
So it's interesting. And I have 2 things I want to share right now with you. In line with what you just shared, actually in about 45 days at the end of March, it looks like I'm hosting an event where I'm going to be speaking for an hour and a half. And then it's going to turn into a singles mixer. And my goal is to get 50 plus, say 25, 30 men and women in this. And I'm working on the logistics, but the idea is it's called Ditch the Dating Apps, meet organically. But you shared something earlier, I think dating when Match.com came out, or really it was AOL Personals and Yahoo Personals, then it got bought out by Match, and then there was JDate and eHarmony. What was interesting, there was actually a lot of success for the dating sites. And what I mean to say, there was more robust information, there was an essay, there were more things checked off. And I believe, and correct me if I'm wrong, I think it was Grindr that got all this started. It was the app where you could hook up, like you're at a bar in Santa Monica and you want to look at who's literally standing next to you that you could hook up with. And that's when swipe apps began. And then they took it to the dating marketplace. And I feel as though that it has both marginalized people, but more importantly, it's bastardized the meeting process. It's brought it down to something so superficial that I'm not surprised we're seeing a decline in the dating marketplace. So, all right. We just bashed dating apps, and yet it's still, by the way, let's just be real. It's still going to be around. It's still a spoke in the wheel. The title of this video is called Make Him Chase You Without Playing Games. And the reason why I chose that is you particularly spend more time coaching men than you do women. I coach women predominantly, and you coach men. Why are men coming to you? Like, what help are they seeking? Are they just looking to hook up, or are they really genuinely looking for a relationship?
Great question. So I've built my business and my reputation on the idea that I'm not here to help guys get laid. Now, here's the truth. Doesn't mean that they don't have, great times along the way, but that's not their primary focus. They really want to develop the confidence and the social skills to meet the person that they truly desire. Now, what their vision is of who they desire and who they actually are built to attract might be two different things. And so my goal is to help bridge that gap, help them become the man that attracts who it is that they are meant to be with. It may not necessarily be what they think they want, but they will certainly be happy with who they get based on who they become.
So, okay. And would you say, like, women will tell me they think men are commitment phobic, men are players, men are emotionally unavailable, or I call them emotionally constipated. They're ghosters. It's just, from your experience, because I sense you work with men from a genuine place, that these are men who sincerely want a relationship. What is their frustration? Like, I can share with you women's frustration, but what are men's frustration in the dating marketplace?
They feel like they don't have a chance. They feel like in a world where you can literally go on social media, and if you're a woman, if you want instant validation, all you need to do is post a picture on social media. And for the most part, if you're attractive, you're going to be flooded with DMs. It's the instant gratification and
for those boomers that are watching, DM stands for
direct messages.
For those of my boomers who are watching. Okay. All right. So keep going.
And so we now live in a world where, the dating marketplace has gone global, right? You're not just walking around the block and finding that person, or going into your neighborhood bar and meeting that person. Like, it has been completely globalized. And guys have a really hard time competing, because if they are interested in an attractive person, someone in Dubai who is living in an amazing life can literally just walk in and, really grab their attention and their appeal and pull them away. So,
let me ask you something. I've heard this argument on all the red pill community and everything. You're really talking about that small percentage of people that live in like Miami, LA, or New York. What about, let's just talk about the average person, that's not dealing with the woman who's an OnlyFans model or anything else. I'm talking about the average woman, between the ages of 30 and 69, if you will, and men. Okay. I'm really talking about men between 30 and 69, I should say. Like, what is their real, like the title is Make Him Chase You. And I'm about to make him chase you, obviously. But if their fear is not even is that really their fear, or is there something deeper that we're not really aware of?
So that was the first part, right? So the second part is, the go-to is rejection, right? Guys are just naturally afraid of rejection, right? And what I found through my time working with guys is that they just lack emotional intelligence, right? They just do. But it's because they also lack emotional experience. So
whoa. That's wait. Say that one more time. I really want you to emphasize this for a moment.
So they lack emotional intelligence, and that is because they lack emotional experience.
Wow. That's now that I haven't heard of it in that way, emotional experience. All right, let's play with this one.
So I'm gonna use simple numbers just to give you an idea of the comparison between the gap between a woman's emotional intelligence and a guy's emotional intelligence, right? So at 18 years old, let's just say you're going to a college, and that, and you're choosing, you're out there, you're socializing, and you're relatively attractive, right? Like, not using any scale, but let's just say you're just an attractive woman, right? And you're going out, let's say between the hours of 10 p.m. to 2 a.m., right? On Friday and Saturday. Now, chances are, if you're out at a bar, or not a bar, like a house party, or you're out at another person's place and there's a lot of guys there and you're mingling, you're probably going to be approached anywhere, on conservatively speaking, let's say 5 men in that 4-hour period, right? You may not be attracted to any of them, but they're going to approach you because you're attractive. They're going to shoot their shot, if they will. So that's 10 guys a weekend between the hours of 10 p.m. and 2 a.m., right? So 8 hours a week, 10 guys a week.
Okay.
If that let's say theoretically you were exposed to that every single week, right?
Okay.
So that's 520 men a year. Now, by the time you're 28, that's 5,200 men who have approached you, right? I'm not even including.
Okay, and I don't mean to interrupt you, but I
okay.
do want to let you know my audience is a bit older. So we've got an older demographic. And by the way, I need to make a correction on something I said. I did say people between the ages of 30 and 69. I got some blowback. So any human over 30 years old, correction. But let's think about this for more like, like that 40-year-old, not the 20-year-old.
Well,
is the 40-year-old woman really getting hit on that frequently, or the 50-year-old woman getting hit on as frequently?
That number will start to decline after the 30 year mark ish, right? Depending on your lifestyle. But I'm really just kind of explaining the gap in intelligence here, right? And so that's 5,200 people by the time you're 28. By the time you're 38, let's say that number goes to somewhere around 8,000 men, right? So in 20 years, you've been approached by 8,000 men. Now, I'm still talking about between the hours of 10 p.m. and 2 a.m. I'm not saying that you're going to be 38 years old out during those hours, but I just wanted to point out 8 hours out of 168, you're being approached. You've been approached by over 8,000 men. I'm not talking about when you're walking down the street, living your life. I mean, so it's so much more than that. Now, let's contrast, right? 5 guys approach a woman in one night. Well, that one guy is probably approaching maybe that one person that night. So that means they're probably approaching 2 women that weekend, which means they're only approaching 100 women in a year. And by the time they're 28, they may have approached 1,000 women, right? So now we have a woman who's approached, 5,000 times, and a guy who has made the approach 1,000 times. Now, I don't know about you, but I have yet to meet more than maybe a dozen men who've been actually able to make over 1,000 approaches. So the numbers are actually even smaller.
I've got game, and I don't even have that kind of number. And I've been around the block for 50 plus years.
Yeah. So I'm just speaking to that gap of emotional experience is just so vast that it's very difficult for guys to figure out what they need to do in order to create a connection, where women, because of natural exposure, they intuitively know what's going on. They can intuitively sense if a guy's just not for them, or if a guy's not legit.
So one of the questions I ask on my application for coaching is, on a scale from 1 to 10, 10 being the highest, how easily can you get a date? And most women say 7, 8, 9, or 10. I mean, they don't have the problem getting a date. They might have a problem getting the kind of date they want, but they have no problem getting the date. I think what you're saying is, for men, and I mean, let's be clear. If you're a man who's 6'2", great physical condition, you've got a bit of money, or you got a fair amount of money, you've got you got 6-pack abs and a chiseled chin, and you look like George Clooney, for argument's sake, you're not going to have a problem connecting with women. The reality is the average person on a scale from 0 to 10 is a 5. Okay. I mean, that's just what average is, right?
Yeah.
Are you saying that I think where you're going is the average guy doesn't even get up to bat?
Yeah.
And so, do you believe, okay, so where I'm coming from is this. I believe there are men who are thirsty for relationships, but they're swiped by.
Yeah. Yep.
Is that a true statement?
This is the disaster of the dating market. And so guys who aren't willing to approach or have the confidence to do so, or have the skill set to do so, they're going to resort to online. Now, the problem with that is they can plan and kind of shape up how they're going to communicate, and it might actually work because they have time, they're not on the spot, they can actually create a good dynamic. But then when they get together on that first date, that's where they get exposed for the most part. And I don't mean that in a negative way. I just mean that, like, those
You mean
gaps
there
where
a lack of emotional experience is exposed. And so,
yeah,
you know what? Is that a woman's responsibility to educate a man on emotional experience?
absolutely not.
Okay. Okay.
Absolutely not. So for any of the women who are paying attention, it is not your responsibility. It is a man's responsibility to get his stuff together, to be in position to attract and chase you. I think it's so important because, you know, I love women. When I used to work with women, a lot of them would tell me, you know, I see the potential in this guy. If he just did certain things, maybe I can encourage him to do so. That actually just doesn't really work because he's not learning anything. He's just basically responding to behavior that you're kind of validating on his end. And then it creates a weird, you know, codependent relationship where he needs validation all the time to know if he's doing the right thing or the wrong thing. And he has zero independent thinking or, you know, kind of going back to what we said, that emotional intelligence to actually know what he should be doing in the first place.
Okay, so let's go back to the title, Make Him Chase You Without Games or Tricks. There are a lot of coaches out there. The book, The Rules, you know, began, you know, the forefront of playing games like don't return a text right away, make him wait, make him do this, you know, like all these game playing. What's going to make a guy really want to invest in a woman? From your perspective, from the guy's perspective. In other words, what do you see, you know, what's it going to take for these guys to actually, and by the way, chase simply means the word effort. Let's just replace the word chase with effort. That's all it is, because you don't want to chase a running, you know, someone that's running away. What's it going to take for these guys to actually make effort without the game playing?
For a long time, when I used to work with women, you know, we would talk about this idea of being proactive. And we talked about how that's not being aggressive, because being proactive doesn't mean to make the first move or to initiate certain things. It's more about physically, maybe in conversation or emotionally putting yourself in position for him to see the signs to make a move. And when you are able to do that, what I've seen, and it could be, so I'll give you like a, this may not be a standard that is relatable right now, but I'm just doing it for visual purposes, right?
Okay,
like right. If you're at a social venue, I don't want to call it a bar because it doesn't have to be a bar, but if you're at a social venue and you're going to connect with people, what's a better place to be? Like out in the corner of the venue or more closer to the men that you are actually interested in connecting with? Right. And so positioning yourself in those positions will allow you to have a better chance of being talked to or being approached. And so little things like that do make a difference, because once again, guys don't have the emotional intelligence. And so what you think is obvious, they may completely miss it. And which kind of sucks. So, right. So the responsibility that I say that women have is just to be more proactive in positioning themselves both in conversation and physically to have a move be made on them.
So I'm going to be candid. I struggle like out in public. Like, you know, it's so funny. I'm so gregarious on channel. I mean, on videos, everybody thinks I'm this extrovert, but believe it or not, I'm actually ridiculously shy when I'm out in public. And I remember one time it was St. Patrick's Day. I was out and there was this woman at a table, like 2 tables over from me. I'm looking at her. She's looking at me. I'm looking at her. She's looking at me. I'm looking at her. She's looking at me. This goes on for about an hour and a half before I finally got the balls to say something. So, and I've got game, you know? And I mean, in other words, I'm a conversationalist. I have no problem, but there's that fear. And I remember, and I share this story with a friend of mine. She was once at a it happened to be a restaurant bar kind of environment. And what she did was to put herself in a position to be seen. She threw an ice cube at a guy. And then he's like, what the hell happened? And they got in a conversation. By the way, they dated for 3 years, you know? Now, I know you're not saying I know that's not, whether we call that aggressive or not. it's kind of making your presence known, I think, is what you're really saying, is make your presence known. But I want to go deeper now. Let's go past the first, second, third, fourth dates. Where is most of the hangups happening in relationships? Like, why is it we're not seeing more healthier, happier relationships once you get past the I like you, you like me phase?
Yeah. I would say just with my clients, I mean, I have some clients now that I'm working with who are married and in relationships. And I would say the number one thing that they want to, when they come to me and they want to be better at, is communication.
Okay.
So one of the things that guys, and I think this is important to say for women to understand too, is guys will always be afraid of rejection. And rejection is something that doesn't go away in a relationship. In fact, if it's not taken care of, it can intensify as the relationship goes on. So
give me an example.
Oh yeah. So we start off with asking someone out, right? That takes, an opportunity for rejection. Well, how about saying I love you? That's another opportunity for rejection. Moving in together, another opportunity for rejection. Engagement, asking someone to marry you, another opportunity for rejection. Having kids, getting a house, meeting the parents, talking about finances. When you're empty nesters, how you guys are going to continue your companionship in your lives, right? There's always going to be these moments where you have a vision for what you may want to have in the relationship, and you're not going to be, might be a little bit of you that isn't sure if it's aligned with your partner and what their values and what their vision is. And so to share that, especially as two people change over the course of that life, right, of their lives. So guys naturally will feel this level of rejection that they're just adverse to all the time. And because of that, they don't communicate what's really going on. They have a hard time communicating what they're feeling, identifying the emotions. They have a hard time actually clearly saying what it is that they want and having dialogue about that, because they're just worried about the rejection. They're worried about, I disagree, and all of a sudden now they feel like the conversation's over. But communication is about dialogue, and a lot of guys have a hard time being able to do that. And I think it creates unnecessary tension and resistance, whether it's because then guys don't stay enough. So,
I recognize the truth in what you just said, or in that experience. Being that I work with women, I've also witnessed women, and by the way, I always keep a little bit of duct tape right here on my table, and I put it over my mouth to demonstrate, because, just let me do it real quick. But there's a fear from women that if they speak up about emotional things, that the guy will run away. So I believe this is a problem for both genders, is whether it's a combination of rejection or a lack of emotional experience on the men's part. Women also have a sense of rejection, and at least from what I've observed, and I think this is I think if we look at the chats going forward, women would agree with me that they also fear speaking up. It's because humans haven't really learned in couplehood how to have more emotional dialogue. And what I mean is dialogue from here. This is my heart, right? By the way, like right here at the heart. And really be vulnerable, be authentic, and be transparent. I just think it hasn't been, men fear rejection, women fear rejection as well. It's just a different side of the coin. I'm a big proponent of couples right from the beginning. If two people are going to be physically intimate with one another, to have deeper conversations at an emotional level and make that a practice of the relationship. Because I think too much time is focused on attraction and romance and not enough time building trust. It's something I continually espouse over and over again in my videos.
I love it.
So really quickly, Thomas, I want to open it up for everyone who's watching. If you have a question for Thomas or myself, write the word question, then post the question there after. Okay, write the word question. We're going to take questions. And so I'm opening it up for everyone. Or you can purchase a super sticker, super chat. There's a little $ in the chat box. All the monies from the super sticker, super chat goes to a scholarship fund in the name of my son, Connor. He's my son who passed away. In his honor, we donate to causes like the Hoffman Process and Insight Institute and discounts on coaching. So we've got our first question popped up from Poultry Flowers. Poultry Flowers. Do you think you should start your own app?
That's a good one. Ironically, I do have sort of an app, but it's not a dating app. It's an advice app. And so if you were to go to theprofessionalwingman.com/AI, you can actually be able to ask for advice from me. And what it means is all my content since 2008 has been imported in there. All my program written content, interviews that I've done on podcasts, it's all been in there. So you actually would hear it from my voice based on the content.
Is it an AI app?
It is an AI app, yes.
Oh, okay. So when we wrap up, I want to get a copy of that.
Yeah, you can get advice in that in real time. But in terms of a dating app, unlikely. Unlikely.
My feeling is, if I was going to start a dating app, this is what it looked like. Everybody would have to have quality, preferably professional photographs taken, and not glam shots, but professional photographs, number one. They would be required to fill out all of the questions. I'd charge $100 a month, because if you don't have skin in the game, then, how serious are you? And make it a flat fee, no extra charges, upgrades. I mean, the reality is we humans here, particularly in the United States, are rather lazy. We won't make it's funny. People won't make investment in their love life, and yet it's the most important decision they'll ever make in their life is who they choose as a partner. So, okay, let's see. We've got some more questions that came in.
Yeah.
Rachel wants to know, what is the best question to ask a guy if he really likes me without making it awkward?
Oh, that's a good one.
Go for it.
So I'm a huge fan of playful teasing and flirting. This is one of the top 2 or 3 things that I work with guys on, because they just, once again, they don't know how to flirt, right? And so I like to keep it playful. So asking a guy if he's really if you find out if he's really into you, you basically would create a question, or you make a statement that would incentivize him to want to answer. So it could be like, oh, you're just saying that because you're trying to be nice, or like, what's another one?
I had a woman once say to me, we had a date, but she goes, if you asked me out on another date, I'd say yes.
Yeah.
And I'm like, all right, well, that was like,
that's like direct.
Yeah.
Right.
That's not playfully, but
super direct, right?
Yeah, but you know what? Made it easy for me to go, and then I asked her out, and it didn't work out. But
yeah, I mean, you could be playful, but I think it goes back to what you were talking about before. You were talking about having like emotionally connected conversation. I like to call it having adult conversation, right? Like if 2 adults are able to have a conversation where they can communicate in the way that they need to be communicated with, there's so much that we can get done in the world, right? Let alone in relationships. But to ask a guy without making it seem awkward, I would pay attention to why you think it's awkward to find out if a guy is into you, right? Because the awkwardness, and this is what I tell my clients, it's only awkward if you decide that it's awkward, because it's your experience. You might think that it's awkward, but the other person who's receiving it may not think anything of
it. Is it because there could be rejection?
Absolutely. That's exactly.
So
that's
now,
really what it is.
All right, let's go down a rabbit hole for a minute. I want to go on a sidetrack here, because I did a post the other day on Facebook. For everybody, I'll post it on YouTube. Rejection, I believe, is a story we make to ourselves. Like, in other words, if a woman says, hey, I'd like to take you out to coffee, and he rejects the idea, that's just rejecting the idea. But if you take that to a level of rejection as if there's something wrong with me, okay, then you've personalized it, you made it a story, and that's not a real statement of fact.
Yeah.
So coming back to what you were saying earlier, it's the expectation you went in with is what you're really, it's awkward if you have an expectation. If you have no expectation, there's nothing awkward about it.
Yeah. I mean, I don't know if you've heard the phrase, but expectations are premeditated resentments. So the
Oh,
moment
wait. Say that out loud for everybody again.
expectations are premeditated resentments.
Oh,
Yeah.
I like that. I
Yeah.
like that.
And now these
Well,
resentments could be towards someone else who you have an expectation for, or they
yeah.
actually can be for yourself who you have expectations for. So if you go
Mm.
in with this expectation that this person is going to like you, or like you said, you create this story that they may or may not like you, whatever story you create, it's going to be right. Right. And then it validates the resentment that you may have towards yourself. But I love what you said. I like to use the word denial because I believe we have a right to deny things that we don't want in our lives, and that's okay. Right? It's a filter. We need to learn how to filter, and I think filtering is healthy when it comes to bringing energy and people into our lives. But to be rejected, I mean, to really be rejected would be to be excommunicated from society, like those
Exactly. I mean,
like the philosophers of old that had to go live in the cave by themselves and carve on the walls, right? Like that's not what we're talking about here.
All right, let's take some more questions. We've got Jane Spitfire in the house. She said, name some places to meet men who might talk. Is the airport, bar, gas station, doctor's office, library, men's shoe store, or even barbershop?
Oh,
I'm going to share what I shared the other day on one of the videos. I think dancing. I think dancing needs to be the primary place to meet. And let me explain why. Typically, men dance with women, women dance with men. I mean, although sometimes women dance with each other, men rarely dance with each other, by the way.
Yeah.
But it requires walking up and saying, would you like to dance? And there's not much pressure with that. And you're not talking, you're just connecting, but you can create an opportunity for talking, and it creates the opportunity to talk afterward. I think dancing needs to come back in like a big, gigantic way from a singles perspective.
I love it. And if you think about the dynamic of dancing, most traditional dancing requires the man to lead. And so what a great way to initiate that dynamic by you stepping in and taking the lead. It just creates a really nice kickoff to what could be a potential connection. But to go back to the answer, I am a huge fan of like lifestyle. I call it assisted serendipity, right? Where you intentionally put yourself in position to meet people. So whether it's waiting in line at Starbucks, talking about, the cake pops. I remember Brian Howie used to talk about this. The cake pops that are in the glass thing, or if you, God forbid someone has like a weird name written on their cup, you can comment on that. You can enjoy conversation with the cashier at the grocery store, walking down the street, maybe waiting on the subway, waiting for the bus, going to the bank, going to the farmer's market. I mean, just going to the gym. I think the gym is actually becoming a much better place to meet people because they're realizing that, hey, I'm actually surrounded by men who share similar values with me when it comes to my health. Like maybe I should start allowing myself to. So that's starting to happen too. Which before
is it because dating apps is it because people have gotten so down on dating apps? It's like they're finally breaking out of this dependency we have of ease of connection. There's this false sense of ease of connection. Do you feel like from a societal perspective, we're bouncing away from that, going back to?
Yeah, I mean, as a society, I mean, we're cyclical. We will. Really? Yeah, I mean, we'll go through a trend and we'll cycle it out and we'll get oversaturated and then it gets played out and then we go back to something that's cool. Like think about it. Vinyls now are making a comeback because people are appreciating what used to be, right? Meanwhile, I forget, I saw an article, I think it was like in China, they finally banned floppy disks. Like it's now finally over.
Oh, really?
Floppy disks are not allowed.
Well, you know what? I don't have a TV. I've got a bunch of old DVDs and I wouldn't even know how to play it because even my computer doesn't have one anymore. Okay, let's take some more questions. We've got Gigi in the house and she says, if men always feel possibility of rejection, could this be the reason they pull away back early in the dating phase?
Spot on. That is spot on, Gigi. Guys who once again, are worried about, if their fear of rejection is higher than the level of their self-confidence, they will recoil. And it becomes, we were talking about before we took questions, the idea of, when women decide to share more of themselves, right? We can categorize that as being emotional, but I think it's just a woman being truly expressive and expressing herself. We have to pay attention to how people receive communication. So for example, I'm someone who's pensive.
Okay.
I don't enjoy being emotionally dumped on. And my wife knows this, right? And so if I feel like it's coming down on me, I will go into my turtle shell and just seek a little bit of safety. Now I'll come back out, but I just need to process things before I'm able to come out and actually communicate. But if you keep poking, as like any turtle would, they'll come out and snip at you. And I obviously would prefer not to do that. But I also, it is my responsibility to understand that that's because my wife, this is how she expresses herself. So I need to build a level of endurance and stamina to hold space for her to be able to communicate that way. And then also learn how to communicate to her the way that she likes to be communicated with. So if I need to be more descriptive and more emotional in how I talk about things, that's going to allow us to have a connection. So guys, this is what I'm talking about when it comes to emotional intelligence, right? It has to come with experience of multiple conversations that you would have with women to get a wide variety of how they communicate. Without that, you're not going to be prepared to handle the conversations and how someone's communicating with you. And so it's really important.
It's interesting as you're sharing this, it reminds me of, a lot of people will say, Jonathan, you're a really good communicator of your emotions and things like that. And I learned this through both some women in my life, but more importantly, for years, I did collectively like group therapy. I mean, it wasn't true group therapy, but it was a group of individuals that got together once a month and we worked on stuff in our lives. And by hearing other people express themselves, both men and women, in a very non-confrontational way, in a very loving, safe environment. And I would think like AA does this as an example, where where you're in a circle and you're sharing, like share circles. It's amazing how, at least for me, I can only speak for myself, but I will tell you that my capacity to express myself was learned through this experience of listening to other people express themselves. And then I just, by de facto almost, or osmosis, I began being better at this. I think most humans, men, and by the way, this is true. Women aren't necessarily, Thomas, let me just say something to the women who think that they're just, perfect emotional communicators. Women are not any better at this. They just have a capacity to be more expressive. And I say it kind of in a boom way, oftentimes, but women can also have duct tape over their mouth and everything else. I think this is a human condition that people struggle. Like, so you're in a relationship, you're married, but you guys have had conversation about how to have conversations.
I mean, and it took a lot of terrible conversations to get to the place where we can actually determine, how to have better conversations, right? And so, and no one's perfect, right? Like you're still going to have like tiffs and miscommunications and misfires, because that's just, like you said, it's the human experience, but with experience comes an ability to understand more and feel more prepared and feel more confident in how you're communicating, and then it just goes back to what I was saying before. The struggle with guys is that they're not exposing themselves enough to that conversation, and
so, well, one of the things I encourage my audience is I put together something called the dating vows, and it's an agreement people make in the early stages of setting kind of the ground rules in relationship. And what's interesting is the other night, one of the women came on, said, I did your dating vows before we were physically intimate. And the guy loved it. Like, I think men are thirsty for guidance. We just need to be pushed in a little bit of direction. So I've got another question here. Dee Dee writes, my boyfriend is 60 and won't let go of his high school girlfriend. Before we got together, she was his friend with Benny's. She is in love with him. I don't like it. What is he getting out of this? I'd like to hear your take before I share my take.
This is interesting. My instant reaction was validation.
Yeah.
You know, it's for a guy. Okay, let's go back to what you were saying before. Like, if you're 6'2", reasonable shape, making money, the amount of options you have in comparison to someone who's not that.
Yeah, 5'8", a little bit balding, a little bit of a gut.
Yeah, pretty big, right? So chances are he's not really thinking about his high school girlfriend, right? Because he has options in front of him that he needs to choose from.
Yeah.
Someone who may not have had options like that in his time can be in a position where he's stuck and enjoys the attention that can be received where he is not used to doing that. Now, I'm not saying this is right. I mean, he is in a relationship and there could be a possibility of emotional cheating here, and that needs to be addressed right away. But especially at 60 years old, this is something that's really important, because if he's not willing to do this, there's a severe lack of maturity here in how he's handling it. But that would be my perspective on that. I think it's just a validation due to lack of options over his years.
You know, it's interesting. I have a male friend. He's 58 years old, and when I met him, he was probably 52. And he was in a 5-year relationship that didn't work out. And he lost some weight. He got in shape. He did some things, to improve his life. All of a sudden, he's on the dating apps. And for a brief period of time, he was a player. Meaning, like, for the first time in his life, he got a lot of attention that he didn't get when he was younger. And he even admitted to me that, I got kind of caught up with the attention and validation, because when I was younger, I barely got any attention or validation. He has since met a really fantastic woman, and they're now in a full-blown relationship, and he's monogamous and exclusive with her. I want to go back to Dee Dee's question, though. Dee Dee, I want to encourage you. Who cares what he is getting out of it? Okay. What's most important is, what are you going to do about it? Like, I think, and I say this, Thomas, and I'm speaking to everyone. Oftentimes women in particular, and men do this too, they're focused on the other person instead of, what am I getting out of a relationship that I'm not happy in? Like, that's the real question. What am I getting out of a relationship I'm not happy with? I'm assuming she's not happy. Otherwise, she wouldn't have posted that. So I think it's always important to have that mirror in front of you and look at you instead of looking at the other person. That's just what I wanted to share with her.
Yeah.
Let's keep going. Let's keep going.
Yeah. These are great questions, guys. I actually love it.
Oh, we have, by the way, I have a great audience. So I just want to give props.
I so appreciate you guys. You guys are awesome. I love
Suzanne says, my ex and I broke up Saturday, 9 months together. It was abruptly really bad. And I accidentally left a few things behind. What should I do? Can I get it back ever?
So I think you can.
Yeah.
Yeah, I absolutely think you can. Right. Listen, things happen. Right. And you might have probably said things that you didn't want to say, and he probably did the same too, but I don't think he's going to enjoy seeing the reminders of that in his house. And I also hope he's not going to be so immature to just toss it away and forget about it too. So I think you can rightfully go and pick it up, just as long as you're prepared to try not to engage in any more conversation with him and you're just grabbing your stuff.
By the way, I'm in full agreement. I would probably send a text message, something along this lines, sadly, the two of us, I would say, sadly, the two of us got heated with each other, and we said some things I'm sure we both, regret. And I just want you to know that any part I played in this to hurt your feelings, I'm genuinely sorry for. And if this is the end of our relationship, I fully accept that. With that said, I left a few things at your home, and it would really mean a lot to me if I could make arrangements to either pick them up while you're there, while you're not there, or something. And I just would like to end on some sort of, some sort of, I'm trying to think of the right word here, just some sort of class between the two of us versus any animosity we might have to us. So I think by acknowledging what happened, taking ownership for your part in what happened, making a request of what you need, do it in a kind, loving way, end with some kindness. I think that at least hopefully it takes down any ice that's built up over his heart by acknowledging that, you know what, we did something kind of stupid, but we both did it, and I'll take ownership on my part. And will you do me this kindness and giving me my shit back?
Yeah, exactly. Right. Once again, adult conversation, right? Like we can disagree and we can have a meltdown, but when it comes to these simple logistics, we should be able to figure out an adult resolution that can allow us to move forward, right? Like this is where communication is so paramount. And I love that. I love that the way you worded that out.
Well, it's easier for me to teach it, but I'm terrible doing it in real time for myself. So Bobby writes, my partner gives the silent treatment, refuses to discuss anything negative, wakes up every day and sweeps the reality of the day before under the carpet. He believes the right relate. She doesn't have a question in there, but let's kind of suppose what she's really coming at here. When you're with a partner who doesn't want to deal with the tough stuff, what are your thoughts on that?
I actually had a client that I worked with. It was during COVID, and it was the first time I ever actually had a husband and a wife on the breakthrough call that was supposed to be with just for the husband. And I could tell that she just was not happy because he was not showing up. And whenever there was a little bit of tension, he would just run into his room and just do whatever that he does in the room. Usually it was work or whatever. Yeah. So we end up working together. And I have like a string of assessments that I do for all my clients to get an understanding of the type of character who's playing this game of life, as I like to call it. And what I found out was his ego is what we would call a peacemaker. And I model my ego through the Enneagram, for those who know about the Enneagram. And so he came off as a peacemaker, right? And so when he's stressed, he is very indolent, right? He does not want conflict. He doesn't want to hear it. And so much so that he removed himself from it. So once we were able to identify that, I had to teach him like how to build the endurance and the courage to face it and have those conversations. The primary fear is like, he is, once again, is being hurt. Maybe not necessarily rejected, but being emotionally hurt, because when someone is running away from tension, it's because they're afraid that they might get wounded. It doesn't feel safe. And when it doesn't feel safe, if they can't create peace, then they run away.
Okay.
Right. And so that is a huge, huge fear. And because of that, it makes you want to avoid reality, right? Like you don't want to face reality because the truth of the reality might actually cause some pain.
Yeah.
But the thing is, you have to face it. You can't avoid it forever. And you don't want to do it in a way that's, I guess, you don't want to do it when it's too late.
While I would say a majority of men tend to be more stoic and tend to stuff their emotions and feelings because we're certainly taught that, I do believe the younger generation, that's changing. I look at someone like my son, there's a picture of him right there, Colin. I want to speak to all the women. While us boomers, or I'm a tail end boomer, a Gen Xer. I think you're a Gen Xer, right? Or a millennial?
I'm an old millennial.
You're an old millennial. Okay.
Yes.
so there's a decade or two between us, but I do believe we're seeing a shift. It may not happen. I also believe in multiple lifetimes. So we don't get it right this time, we do it again. Yeah. But I do believe that because of conditioning, so many men there's a significant percentage of men that just can't go there. I also believe that there's an awakening for a lot of men as well. Mm-hmm. And there's certainly men that have that capacity to be emotionally available and so forth. I do believe there is a shift, because going to therapy 30 years ago was like taboo. It was a scarlet letter. Now I'm seeing therapy for men as mainstream. So, all right, this is going to be probably our last question of the night. Is it better to date one man at a time or a few guys? What do you think?
I love this. For me, it's very simple. If you're younger, it's okay. I believe it's okay if you don't have enough experience to know what you want. But if you're at a place where you know what you want, I believe it's not. I think you should date one at a time. The energy that's involved in connecting with someone when you're at that level and you're at that place in your life is so important that you don't want to fragment that with other guys who can come in, especially if one of those guys is a taker. And so you just don't, you don't want to do that. When you're younger, you have a propensity, you have some slack in making a few mistakes and learning what is ultimately what you want. But when you're older, you just want to zero in and then lock in.
You know, I was afraid you were going to say the opposite. I'll be honest with you. I was a little concerned. So I have let's talk about this for a second. Let's differentiate meeting someone for the first time versus dating someone. I think there's a big difference, because you can meet someone once, twice, or three times and still not be dating, even though we call these meetings dates. Okay. Mm-hmm. I do believe if two people are going, like if you go on a first date with someone on a Monday night, and you never see them again, you're not dating that person. So you can see someone on Tuesday night. But the minute two people begin to like each other enough to where they're talking about exploring a relationship together, I'm a staunch believer we date one person at a time for a variety of different reasons. Now, I know Pat Allen and I know a lot of coaches will tell you do duty dating or date multiple people. But here's the dilemma with that. If you're dating multiple people and he's dating multiple people, you guys are going to be crossing at the night. There's not going to be enough time to even really get to know the other person, because dating lacks today a sense of intentionality. I think if we're going, at least I can only speak for myself, I date with intention. I mean, I'm looking for a life partner. Do we work well enough to get to that point? That's what I want to explore.
Yeah.
And if you're spreading yourself too thin, going back to your question, Jane, I just don't believe that's any benefit by doing so.
And the last thing I'll say is to add to you said intentionality, which I think is so key as you get older. Yeah. I think what's also important is presence, right? We live in a world where everything is trying to steal our presence, especially dating apps. If you're dating multiple people, you have very little attention to give to the person who's right in front of you, because your phone is buzzing from all the messages and the potential likes that you have from other potential partners. So when you minimize it with intentionality, it allows you to be more present and you get a fuller experience of the date that you ultimately want.
So I have a confession, and I think you'll probably, you're married, so you're not in this category, but for those who follow my channel know I was in a significant relationship that ended relatively recently. Mm-hmm. But in the first month that we were connected, and we agreed to be exclusive and monogamous fairly quickly.
Yeah.
I didn't give up the dating apps for almost 30 days. And because it was so fucking addictive. I mean, I was like, I mean, cognitively, like, I'm not cheating per se. I wasn't actually talking, but that validation, that it was like I was literally like having to wean myself off of coffee, if you will, or make it sugar, if you will. And I was having a hard time. And I shared this with my then partner at the time. I go, I want to just be really transparent with you. I don't, I literally, what I did when I shared that with her after about, it wasn't a month, it was say a couple weeks, I should say, now that I think back, I had to physically delete the apps.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so when you're dating and you're not exclusive yet, this is the tricky part. We agreed to explore a relationship and be exclusive. But when you're dating, boy, are dating apps so ridiculously addictive.
The easy analogy and comparison I can give is it's no different than social media apps, right?
Yeah, that's true.
You know what I mean? Like, think about it. Like, imagine if you were on Instagram and you finally found someone that you really wanted to follow, but that was the only person that you could follow. And that person was actually with you in your life. So there was no need to actually be on, the social media apps anymore, right? But the scrolling and the swiping and the liking and the commenting and seeing who likes your stuff, it just is so addictive. I mean, we have yet to the amount of reports that are going to come out over the next 5 to 10 years about what social media has done and the impact it has. We can easily connect it to the way online dating apps are as well, because they're designed very similarly. And because of that, it's highly addicting.
I'm going to wrap up with this thought, and then I'd like you to share some of your contact info. A lot of people want to go back to some traditional way of dating, like before electronics, if you will, like I'm talking about before smartphones, before social media, before dating apps. That's the fantasy. The reality is this is what we're faced with. And whether we like it or not, it's here. These are temptations. These are things we have to deal with. And it requires, you said presence, but I want to piggyback the word discipline or self-discipline, if you will, because that's what presence is the discipline to be present, right?
To be here.
We have so many distractions, and also a sense of compassion. I'm guilty of the addiction. I'm not proud of it. I'm guilty of it. I just want a little compassion because I got sucked in, it was like crack cocaine. At the same time, I have to take ownership for my actions. My friend Thomas, thank you for being on. Can you share? I'm going to put links to how people can connect with you, but just give your elevator speech to everybody and how they can connect with you.
Yeah, well, first of all, thank you so much for having me on. It's such a joy. I love you guys. You guys are an awesome and dynamic audience, and I love the comments and the questions. And so if you want to find me, you can go to theprofessionalwingman.com. I do actually have a good amount of content around for women back when I was actually actively working with them. And you can also contact me on social media. If you are on social media, I'm at The Professional Wingman there as well. Feel free to shoot me a message, shoot me an email. Everything is open. I would love to hear from you and find ways where I can support you. I think it's so important to, if there's anything to kind of sign off with is, we're now living in a world. One of the things you said is really important that I'm very passionate about is that I am witnessing an awakening that's happening with a lot of people, both young and old. And I think it's creating an amazing opportunity for us to be able to learn the things that we need to ascend in our lives. And I think it's just a really good opportunity. So if there's anything I can do to support you on that journey, please don't hesitate to reach out.
Folks, I do want to share something about Thomas. We met, that's probably a decade ago, give or take. And truly one of the good guys out there. Ladies, I just want you to know, good men exist. I know this because we broke bread several times. And I know you have a big heart. You have a fantastic marriage. You have a child. And you really live, breathe, wanting to help people. So I just want to acknowledge that. By the way, Rachel says, Jonathon, have Thomas back again. He resonates with me, please.
Rachel,
so we're going to have you back in the house. Maybe we'll go down a different rabbit hole. But from the bottom of my heart, buddy, thanks so much for being on. I'm just going to reach in the camera and give you a big hug of appreciation.
Thanks, bro.
And
thanks
for everyone. Folks, everyone, thanks for being on. Make him chase you without any games or tricks. We talked about the obsolescence of dating apps. I hope you found value in this conversation. If you did, please hit that like button. Please share this video. Please subscribe to my channel and check out Thomas's contact info as well. And if you have a comment, post it below as well. I want to thank all that were on tonight. Thanks a bunch. Wishing you all a fantastic evening. Bye now.